Right now, you are sitting inside a perimeter. You believe the physical fence, the armed sentries, and the biometric scanners guarantee your operational survival.
You are incorrect.
An adversary does not need to physically touch your fence to destroy your mission. They only require you to update your social media profile or connect to a public Wi-Fi network.
Or perhaps conceal a mounting credit card debt.
Welcome to the Blue Suit Files. We are initiating a targeted scan of the Airman Development and Testing Chart. We are specifically isolating the comprehension baseline for Chapter 18, Security.
The objective here is to establish the precise cognitive requirement for a technical sergeant.
Exactly. The system dictates that you must achieve a Level B comprehension for all sections within this chapter. Level B is defined strictly as understanding.
Which means rote memorization of data points is entirely insufficient.
Right. Understanding is the ability to construct meaning, to interpret, summarize, and explain. You are required to understand the structural relationships between these disparate security systems.
You must comprehend how physical perimeters interact with digital emanations.
Yeah.
How human behavioral flaws compromise absolutely everything.
The clinical reality of Chapter 18 dictates that security is never a passive state.
Look, it is not a status you simply achieve. It is an active, continuous denial of opportunity. The doctrine explicitly states the foundational purpose of security is to never permit the enemy to acquire an unexpected advantage.
And the consequences of failure in this domain are lethal.
Lethal and mathematically predictable. We are mapping the anatomy of integrated defense, information protection, and human vulnerability today.
So, this deep dive will break down the precise architecture of why these regulations exist. We are examining the dark realities of the threat landscape.
The inevitable points of human failure.
Right, and the severe operational fallout when the protective system breaks down. We begin with physical space. The logic of defense has to start there.
You must understand the anatomy of an installation's defense geometry.
The text defines three distinct spatial concepts. The first is the base perimeter. This is defined simply as the physical boundary of the installation.
It is the fence line.
Exactly. It is the visible demarcation between federal property and the civilian sector. But the second concept requires interpretation. It is the base boundary.
This is where it gets complicated.
Joint Publication 310 defines this as a line delineating the surface area of a base to facilitate coordination and deconfliction of operations. The text utilizes the acronym METTTC to establish this boundary.
METTTC. Mission, enemy, terrain and weather, time, troops available, and civil considerations.
The doctrine explicitly acknowledges a structural vagueness here. The base boundary may not coincide with the fenced perimeter or property lines or even legal boundaries.
No, it is a fluid line. It is dictated entirely by operational necessity. Look, the base boundary is a variable, not a constant. It shifts based on the calculus of the threat.
So if you rely solely on the physical fence, the base perimeter, you have already ceded the initiative to the adversary.
Completely. The physical fence is static. The enemy is dynamic. Consider the civil considerations aspect of METTC.
Let us break that down.
Say a public civilian highway runs parallel to your perimeter fence, maybe just 50 yards from a flight line. Your legal property line ends at that fence.
Right, you have no legal jurisdiction beyond it.
But operationally, if an adversary can park a vehicle-borne, improvised explosive device on that public highway, your physical fence is entirely irrelevant.
The blast radius does not respect legal property lines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Therefore, the installation commander must project the base boundary outward to encompass that threat. They have to coordinate with local civilian law enforcement to monitor that highway.
And if you cannot project that boundary,
You are accepting the mathematical probability of your own destruction.
which brings us directly to the third concept, the base security zone. This is a unique designation utilized to describe the area of concern outside the base perimeter.
It is defined strictly by vulnerability.
Right. Specifically, it is the terrain from which the base is vulnerable to standoff weapons. The doctrine defines these weapons precisely as mortars, rockets, and man-portable air defense systems, or MANPADS.
Think of the base security zone as the lethal radius of physics. The system acknowledges that an adversary does not need to breach your gates to achieve catastrophic mission degradation.
They just need proximity.
If an adversary can stand on a public hill 3 miles away and drop a mortar onto a runway or fire a manpad at an aircraft on approach, that hill is your base security zone.
The clinical reality is that the weapon's range dictates your vulnerability.
Exactly. So if the installation commander cannot align the base boundary to encompass the entire base security zone, perhaps because they lack the legal jurisdiction or maybe just the sheer troop numbers to occupy a 3-mile radius, they have limited options.
They are forced to either mitigate the risk through external intelligence agencies or explicitly accept the risk of enemy attack from that outside terrain.
You are existing within a calculated radius of acceptable lethality. You are trusting that the adversary will not utilize the physics available to them.
Operating within this spatial geometry, commanders execute integrated defense. The objective is to achieve 9 desired effects.
9 specific effects derive from the integrated defense risk management process.
The sequence is incredibly rigid. Anticipate, deter, detect, assess, warn, defeat, delay, defend, recover.
This is not a random assortment of tactical goals. It is a highly structured, descending staircase of failure mitigation.
The system is designed to neutralize the threat at the highest possible step.
You have to analyze the sequential logic of these 9 effects. If you memorize this simply as a list, you fail the level B requirement.
Because you do not understand the relation.
Right. You must recognize it as a timeline of impending failure. Each step is a direct reaction to the collapse of the preceding step.
So you attempt to anticipate the threat first, through intelligence preparation of the operational environment and crime trend analysis.
You analyze chatter, you monitor local civil unrest, you identify hostile intent before it manifests.
But human intelligence is flawed. Anticipation fails.
When it fails, you drop to the second step, deter. You attempt to convince the adversary that an attack is mathematically unwise.
By deploying active community policing, highly visible controlled area marking, and robust physical security measures, you present a hardened target.
The system logic dictates that a rational adversary will observe these deterrence measures and abandon their objective.
However, the system also accounts for the irrational or highly motivated adversary.
Right. If deterrence is ignored, your system must rely on the third step, detect.
You deployed lighting, intrusion detection systems, seismic sensors, closed-circuit television.
The perimeter is blanketed in surveillance to capture the anomaly, but a camera does not detect intent. It only detects movement.
So detection is clinically useless without the fourth step, assess.
Exactly. The sensor triggers an alarm, but the system cannot act until human verification occurs. You must deploy cameras, posted sentries, or armed response forces to identify the anomaly.
You have to know whether it is a stray animal, a wandering civilian, or an armed hostile force.
And the critical failure point here is time. The duration between detection and assessment is the exact window in which the adversary maneuvers unchallenged.
Once an assessment confirms a hostile threat, the system initiates the fifth step, warn.
You must immediately notify friendly forces to seek cover and secure assets.
The system utilizes mass notification protocols, public address systems, hand and arm signals in a tactical environment, or automated cellular messaging.
Following the warning, the objective shifts to the sixth step, defeat.
This requires the progressive application of force, a coordinated security response to neutralize the threat entirely.
Here is where the clinical reality of defense in depth is exposed. Look, if you cannot defeat the threat, say the adversary has superior numbers, superior firepower, or tactical surprise, your system must degrade to the seventh step. Delay is an admission of temporary defeat. It requires a layered application of barriers, physical obstacles, and hardened technology.
It is buying time with physical mass.
You are sacrificing infrastructure to slow the adversary's advance so that a larger response force can be mobilized.
I must interject to clarify the systemic intent here. Delay is not an admission of total defeat. It is a tactical redeployment of resources. The doctrine mandates defense in depth, specifically so that a single point of failure does not result in total mission collapse.
Fair point. But if the delay tactics are breached, the system forces a transition to the eighth step, defend.
This requires threat and effects-based planning. All friendly forces, not just security personnel, are integrated into a single plan.
You are fighting from established, fortified positions based on rigorous risk analysis. Defend is the final, desperate retention of the asset.
It means the enemy is inside the wire.
And the objective is raw survival. Finally, when the kinetic event concludes, you reach the ninth step, recover.
You implement the comprehensive emergency management plan 10-2 to consolidate forces, triage casualties, and restore baseline operations.
You must understand that every single step downward on this 9-point scale represents a massive escalation in risk, structural damage, and potential loss of human life. When you reach recover, the system has already absorbed catastrophic damage.
To rationally allocate finite defensive resources within this defense-in-depth model, the system categorizes assets using security protection levels, numbered 1 through 4.
The system cannot protect everything equally.
Right. Protection Level 1, or PL1, applies to resources where loss, theft, destruction, damage, misuse, or compromise results in unacceptable mission degradation to the strategic capability of the United States.
Or catastrophic consequences for the nation.
Examples include nuclear weapons, designated command and control facilities, and presidential aircraft. PL1 requires maximum means to detect and defeat a hostile force.
Focus on that bureaucratic phrasing for a moment. Catastrophic consequences for the nation. This is not a local operational setback. A PL1 compromise fundamentally alters the geopolitical balance of power. The acceptable risk is absolute zero. Therefore, the physical barriers, the psychological vetting, and the lethal force authorization are absolutely maximized.
The systemic phrasing scales down precisely as the mathematically acceptable risk scales up.
Let's look at PL2.
Protection Level 2 applies to resources where loss results in significant mission degradation to warfighting capability. Examples include non-nuclear alert forces and expensive, one-of-a-kind intelligence gathering systems.
PL2 requires significant deterrence.
Then Protection Level 3 removes the word significant entirely. Loss results merely in mission degradation.
Examples include non-alert resources that can be generated to alert status.
Right. And PL3 requires a reasonable degree of deterrence to impede a hostile force and limit damage.
Notice the shift in language there. Reasonable degree of deterrence.
It is a calculated vulnerability.
The system is coldly calculating that a PL3 asset can be replaced. I mean, a squadron of standard non-alert fighter aircraft is valuable, but its destruction does not collapse the nation.
The system accepts that an adversary might breach a PL3 area if they're willing to absorb high casualties.
Exactly. Finally, Protection Level 4 applies to resources that directly or indirectly support power projection.
Loss here would adversely affect mission capability. Examples include facilities storing sensitive conventional arms, fuels, and finance vaults.
PL4 relies on owners containing resources in controlled areas, with security forces providing the response. It is the baseline of operational survival.
A fuel depot is vital, but it is not highly classified.
Right. The physical defense structure of gates, zones, and protection levels is entirely logical. It is built on mathematics, physics, and firepower.
But an adversary knows your physical defenses are formidable?
Therefore, they bypass the physical geometry entirely. They attack the invisible vulnerabilities.
Which requires us to synthesize physical defense with the psychological and informational domain. This physical defense structure transitions directly into the invisible war of operations security.
Derived from Section 18B.
The United States Air Force Operations Security Program exists to reduce vulnerability by eliminating adversary collection of critical information. The system logic relies on a profiling process.
Because friendly forces are always under observation.
Signature managers are tasked with applying countermeasures to hide, control, or simulate indicators. The systemic goal is to modify day-to-day activities to create variations in the status quo, effectively camouflaging true operational intent.
The clinical reality is that adversaries do not require highly classified, top-secret documents to destroy an asset.
They require an indicator.
An indicator is a friendly, detectable action or piece of open-source information that can be interpreted to derive critical information.
The physical fence protects the aircraft.
But the fence cannot protect the deployment schedule if you broadcast it. Look, the doctrine breaks down 5 basic characteristics of operations security indicators.
You must understand how an adversary pieces these together. The first characteristic is signatures. These are observable activities, specialized equipment, and operational trends that characterize a specific unit or mission.
Every unit has a signature. If ignored, an adversary will exploit your operational signature.
For example,
if a bomber squadron always conducts maintenance run-ups at 0400 hours prior to a long-range strike, that acoustic footprint is a signature. The adversary does not need radar. They just need to listen.
The second characteristic is associations. This is the relationship of an indicator to other activities or pieces of equipment. The relationship causes it to stand out.
Association is how the adversary builds context. Let us say an unusual number of heavy transport aircraft arrive at an installation.
That is a signature.
Right. But simultaneously, local civilian catering companies receive massive, expedited orders for field rations. And the base clinic cancels all routine appointments to process deployment clearances.
The adversary associates the transport aircraft, the food, and the medical shifts.
Individually, they are administrative anomalies. Associated together, they mathematically prove an impending large-scale deployment.
The third characteristic is profiles. The sum of your unit's signatures and associations creates your unique operational profile. It is the baseline of your normal behavior.
Establishing a baseline is critical for intelligence collection. The adversary watches your base for months, sometimes years.
They learn the rhythm.
They learn the rhythm of your security patrols, the volume of your daily radio traffic, the predictable shift changes at the main gate. They map your profile with clinical patients.
They do this so they can identify the fourth characteristic, contrasts.
Yes.
A contrast is any difference observed between an activity's standard profile and its most recent actions.
A contrast is the absolute goldmine for an adversary. When you introduce a contrast, say, a sudden shift in working hours, an uncharacteristic deployment of equipment to the flight line, or a massive spike in encrypted digital traffic, you provide the adversary with a targeted anomaly.
If your profile dictates that the base is quiet on Sundays, and suddenly on a Sunday morning, vehicle traffic triples, and the commander's staff car is parked outside the command post.
That is a glaring contrast. They exploit that anomaly to anticipate your operational objectives, and the fallout is the immediate loss of operational effectiveness. Your mission is compromised before the aircraft ever leaves the tarmac.
To prevent this, the system logic focuses on the fifth characteristic, exposure. Exposure dictates when and for how long an indicator is observed.
The directive is to minimize exposure.
Naturally.
The danger of exposure cannot be overstated. The longer an indicator is exposed to the environment, the easier it is for an adversary to form associations and update your operational profile.
So if you stage sensitive equipment on an open tarmac for 4 days instead of 4 hours, you have exponentially increased the probability of overhead satellite detection.
Civilian observation and human intelligence reporting. Time is the adversary's greatest ally in the profiling process.
I must challenge the premise that standard administrative actions can lead to catastrophic failure. This system mandates that critical information is classified.
Right.
An adversary observing pizza deliveries or gate traffic is merely guessing. They do not possess the classified operational order. The system logic dictates that as long as classified information is protected, the mission remains secure.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of intelligence synthesis. It is the exact vulnerability the doctrine is trying to correct.
They explain.
The adversary does not need your operational order. Intelligence is a mosaic. They take one piece of unclassified data from a social media post, another piece from a commercial satellite image, and a third piece from a local civilian contractor.
They assemble the mosaic.
Exactly. By the time you realize your operations security has failed, the adversary has already deduced the contents of your classified operational order without ever touching a classified network.
This invisible vulnerability leads directly into the mechanisms of information protection and the inevitable reality of human failure, detailed in Section 18C.
Information protection is the rigid, systemic safeguarding of classified information and controlled unclassified information, or CUI.
The system categorizes classified information into 3 distinct levels based entirely on the anticipated damage of unauthorized disclosure.
Anticipated damage.
Right. Top secret disclosure is expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. Secret disclosure is expected to cause serious damage. Confidential disclosure is expected to cause damage.
The categorization is absolute and legally binding.
The clinical phrasing is critical.
Exceptionally grave damage. We are talking about the compromise of vital defense plans, the exposure of covert intelligence operatives leading to their execution, or the compromise of critical cryptographic algorithms.
The creation of this information occurs in 2 distinct ways, and both are entirely reliant on human judgment. Original classification is the initial decision made by a designated, highly vetted government authority that information requires protection in the interest of national security.
The second method is derivative classification.
This is the act of incorporating, paraphrasing, restating, or generating classified information in a new form.
The system logic mandates that a derivative classifier must respect the initial determinations made by the original classification authority.
If an original document dictates a paragraph is secret, any subsequent document utilizing that paragraph must also be marked secret.
To ensure systemic compliance, derivative classifiers must receive initial training and mandatory annual refresher training.
But training does not eradicate human error or fatigue.
No, it does not. A derivative classifier might copy a paragraph from a top-secret document, paste it into an unclassified email, and mistakenly believe they have successfully paraphrased away the classified nuances.
They have not.
They have just initiated a catastrophic data spill.
To prevent such occurrences, the system mandates rigorous physical security measures. Classified material cannot exist in a vacuum. It requires constant surveillance or specialized containment.
Authorized personnel must utilize standardized cover sheets to physically shield documents from visual compromise in mixed-use environments.
You must use Standard Form 703 for top secret, Standard Form 704 for secret, and Standard Form 705 for confidential.
Furthermore, at the conclusion of daily operations, Standard Form 701, the Activity Security Checklist, must be utilized to record end-of-day security checks of all vaults, secure rooms, and containers.
The system requires a physical signature verifying that the perimeter is secure.
But when these physical and administrative controls inevitably fail, the system categorizes the resulting security incidents with clinical precision.
You must understand the analytical distinctions between these failures. An infraction is a failure to comply with security requirements that does not result in the loss or compromise of classified information.
It is often administrative. It may be entirely unintentional.
For example, leaving a safe unlocked while you are still standing in the same secure room. No unauthorized person saw the contents, but the rule was broken.
The system treats an infraction as a correctable error.
However, a violation indicates a knowing, willful, and negligent disregard for security regulations that could result in loss or compromise.
The analytic reality is that an infraction, if left uncorrected by leadership, systematically breeds a culture of violations.
If an airman learns that leaving a safe unlocked results in no consequences, the deviance becomes normalized.
Which leads directly to a compromise. A compromise is an unauthorized disclosure of classified information to a person who does not possess a valid clearance, the authorized access, or the requisite need to know.
A compromise is a confirmed breach. A loss occurs when classified records or materials cannot be physically located or accounted for.
The system assumes a loss is a compromise until an investigation proves otherwise.
Finally, data spills occur when classified data is introduced onto an unclassified information system or a system with a lower classification level.
A data spill is a nightmare of contamination. It is not just one file being compromised. It contaminates the entire server, the local network, and every hard drive that's synchronized with it.
But trace every one of these incidents backward. The infraction, the violation, the compromise, the data spill.
They do not originate from a failure of the physical paper or the digital code. They originate from a human being making a decision.
The system relies entirely on personnel consistently complying with regulations. Therefore, the physical defense of the installation is subordinate to the psychological defense of the human mind.
This necessitates the personnel security program.
The system mandates continuous evaluation of trustworthiness. Eligibility for access to classified information is not a permanent right. It requires initial and continuous adjudication by the Department of Defense Central Adjudication Facility.
The system views human flaws not as personal failings, but as physical vulnerabilities in the operational perimeter.
To manage this massive liability, the system evaluates eligibility against 13 adjudicative guidelines.
This is a clinical psychological framework designed to track specific human behaviors that indicate a vulnerability to espionage, coercion, negligence, or blackmail.
To achieve Level B understanding, we must break down the clinical logic and the inevitable consequences of all 13 guidelines. We start with Guideline 1, Allegiance to the United States.
An individual must be of unquestioned allegiance to the nation. This system cannot tolerate ideological ambiguity.
If there is any reason to suspect an individual's allegiance, such as association with organizations that advocate the violent overthrow of the government, their willingness to safeguard classified information is fundamentally compromised.
It is the most direct threat to internal security.
Guideline 2 is Foreign Influence. The system tracks an individual's foreign contacts and family interests.
The system is not accusing the airman of treason here. It is acknowledging a mathematical vulnerability.
The vulnerability is divided loyalties.
Exactly. If an airman has immediate family living in a hostile foreign nation, that family becomes leverage. An individual may be deeply loyal to the United States, but if a foreign intelligence service threatens the life of their sibling overseas, they can be manipulated. They can be induced or coerced to act against United States interests just to protect their blood.
Guideline 3, Foreign Preference. This occurs when an individual acts in a manner that indicates a preference for a foreign country over the United States.
such as maintaining foreign citizenship or voting in foreign elections.
The behavioral fallout of a foreign preference is a documented propensity to provide information or make decisions that are economically, politically, or militarily harmful to the United States.
You cannot serve two masters when processing top-secret operational orders.
Guideline 4. Sexual behavior. The system monitors sexual conduct. The doctrine explicitly notes that no adverse inference may be raised solely based on sexual orientation.
However, certain behaviors trigger systemic concern.
Understand the clinical reality here. The system does not monitor sexual behavior for moral or religious reasons.
It monitors it for leverage. Sexual behavior that involves a criminal offense, reflects a severe lack of judgment, or indicates a psychological disorder subjects the individual to undue influence.
If an individual is engaging in illicit sexual activities and desperate to hide it from their spouse, their commander, or the public, they have created a vulnerability.
A hostile intelligence asset will discover the secret and utilize blackmail. To conceal the sexual behavior, the individual must engage in deception. If they have the psychological capacity to deceive their family, they possess the capacity to deceive the security manager.
Guideline 5. Personal conduct. This evaluates questionable judgment, lack of candor, dishonesty, or an unwillingness to comply with rules and regulations.
This is the baseline indicator of systemic noncompliance. If you lie on a routine administrative form to avoid a minor inconvenience, you have demonstrated a willingness to bypass established protocol.
You possess the psychological capacity to conceal a security compromise.
The system cannot trust you with the nation's secrets if it cannot trust your signature on a leave request.
Guideline 6. Financial considerations. The system tracks an individual's financial stability, debt-to-income ratio, and spending habits.
Financial instability is the primary vector for espionage. It is the most common human failure point.
The system rigorously tracks the inability to satisfy debts.
Massive, unmanageable debt, whether from gambling, cryptocurrency losses, or severe overextension, indicates poor self-control. More importantly, it places the individual in a state of desperation.
They are at immediate risk of engaging in illegal acts to generate funds.
A top-secret document is suddenly viewed not as a national security asset, but as a $50,000 exit strategy from financial ruin.
Conversely, the system also tracks unexplained affluence.
Right. If a staff sergeant driving a standard vehicle suddenly purchases a luxury sports car and a high-end property without a known source of legitimate income, it is a glaring indicator of proceeds from financially profitable criminal acts, including the sale of classified data.
Guideline 7. Alcohol consumption. The system evaluates alcohol-related incidents, driving under the influence, and alcohol dependence.
Excessive alcohol consumption biologically degrades the cognitive barriers required to protect restricted information.
It leads to the exercise of questionable judgment, the failure to control impulses, and the loosening of operational security protocols in social settings.
An intoxicated individual is an easily manipulated source for human intelligence gathering.
Guideline 8. Drug involvement. The system strictly prohibits the use of illegal drugs or the misuse of prescription drugs.
Beyond the immediate physiological impairment of judgment, engaging in illegal drug use raises fundamental, systemic questions about a person's willingness to comply with federal laws and regulations.
If an individual will routinely violate federal narcotics laws for recreation, the system calculates a high probability they will violate federal espionage laws under pressure.
Furthermore, a drug habit creates an ongoing financial demand, linking directly back to Guideline 6, financial considerations.
Guideline 9. Psychological conditions. The system tracks emotional, mental, and personality conditions that can impair reliability.
The doctrine clarifies that a formal diagnosis is not required to trigger a concern.
A qualified mental health professional must evaluate potentially disqualifying information. However, the system explicitly states that seeking mental health counseling cannot solely raise a negative inference.
The clinical logic must balance operational security with human maintenance. The system wants personnel to seek help for stress or trauma.
But if a psychological condition manifests in severe paranoia, delusions, or violent instability, the individual cannot be trusted to accurately process reality.
If they cannot process reality, they cannot reliably process classified data. The vulnerability is structural cognitive impairment.
Guideline 10. Criminal conduct. The system tracks any history or pattern of criminal activity.
Criminal activity, by its very nature, calls into question a person's willingness to comply with the societal and legal framework. It creates immediate empirical doubt regarding the reliability, trustworthiness, and ability to follow the rigid protocols required for national defense.
Guideline 11. Handling protected information. The system evaluates any previous deliberate or negligent failure to comply with rules for protecting sensitive information.
This is a direct, observable failure of the core security requirement. If an individual has a history of leaving classified vaults unsecured or repeatedly causing data spills, it proves an inherent inability to safeguard the system.
Past performance is the most accurate predictor of future behavior.
Always.
Guideline 12. Outside activities. The system evaluates involvement in outside employment or activities that could pose a conflict of interest.
If an individual holds outside employment with a foreign corporation or an entity seeking defense contracts, it creates an increased risk of unauthorized disclosure.
The individual's external financial survival or career advancement competes directly with their internal security obligations.
Divided loyalties create inevitable compromise.
Guideline 13. Use of information technology. The system tracks non-compliance with rules pertaining to information systems, network security, and password management.
A failure to follow digital protocols is a failure of physical security in the modern operational environment.
If an individual repeatedly shares passwords, plugs unauthorized USB drives into the network, or bypasses firewalls for convenience, they are voluntarily dismantling the digital perimeter.
They are inviting malicious logic into the system.
This necessary transition into the digital environment leads us to Part 4, Cybersecurity, Mobility, and Emanations. This is contained in Section 18D. The digital perimeter is not governed by physical fences. It is governed by strict statutory logic and network architecture.
We begin with the protection of operational data.
The Privacy Act of 1974 strictly restricts the collection, maintenance, and disclosure of personal information maintained in a system of records.
The system logic dictates that personal information can only be disclosed to Department of Defense personnel who possess an official, verifiable need to know, or via a published, legally vetted routine use.
Additionally, the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, provides public access to federal agency records. However, the system imposes a mandatory rigid time limit. The agency has exactly 20 workdays to either deny the request under specific legal exemptions or release the records.
To protect the vast network containing these records, the doctrine outlines 5 precise, sequential functions of the cybersecurity program.
First is identify. You must develop organizational understanding to manage cyber risk to systems, assets, data, and capabilities.
You cannot protect what you do not know exists on your network.
Second is protect. You must implement robust access controls, firewalls, and encryption to ensure the delivery of critical services.
Third is detect. You must possess the automated ability to detect cybersecurity events and anomalies in real-time network traffic.
Fourth is respond. When an anomaly is detected, you must take immediate, predefined action regarding the event to isolate the compromised sector.
And fifth is recover. You must restore capabilities and services that were impaired by the cybersecurity event.
The digital perimeter, however, extends far beyond the mainframe. It extends to mobile computing devices. The doctrine mandates strict rules here. Portable electronic devices, laptops, tablets, smartphones must be explicitly approved before processing any Department of Defense information.
Unassigned mobile devices must be physically secured to prevent tampering or theft.
Furthermore, the doctrine mandates an absolute non-negotiable prohibition on the use of public computing facilities.
You must not, under any circumstances, use hotel business centers, airport kiosks, or other public resources to process government information.
Using web applications to access government services from a public facility constitutes an immediate compromise of login credentials and must be reported as a security incident.
Let us analyze the human failure point here. An airman is on temporary duty travel. Their approved government laptop dies. They have a mandatory operational report due in 1 hour.
The system logic dictates they fail the deadline to protect the information.
But the human logic, driven by fear of reprimand, rationalizes a shortcut. They go to the hotel business center, log into a government webmail portal, and send the report. They believe they have succeeded.
But the clinical reality is they have just broadcasted their secure login credentials across an unencrypted public Wi-Fi network monitored by a dozen hostile actors and typed their password on a keyboard infected with commercial key logging software.
The network is now compromised.
I understand the vulnerability of public networks, but within a secured military facility, the system mandates that classified and unclassified equipment must remain physically separated. If both systems are government-owned and contained within a secure room, why does the doctrine demand physical distance between them?
Because the adversary does not care about your secure room. They care about physics. The analytic why behind the separation of equipment is rooted in a concept known as TEMPEST.
TEMPEST, formerly known as emission security.
It addresses the clinical reality of electromagnetic radiation. Cryptographic equipment, information systems, and telecommunication systems produce compromising emanations.
Every time a keystroke is registered, every time a monitor refreshes, the copper wiring and circuitry invisibly broadcasts their data through microscopic electromagnetic signals.
So, the machine is inadvertently acting as a radio transmitter.
Precisely. It is leaking data into the physical space around it. The objective of Tempest is to deny adversaries access to these emanations within an inspectable space.
The inspectable space is the physical area surrounding the equipment where an adversary cannot intercept signals without being visually or physically detected.
If an unclassified router, or even a commercial coffee maker with a Wi-Fi chip, is placed too close to a top-secret terminal, that unclassified device can act as an unintended antenna.
It absorbs the microscopic electromagnetic spikes from the classified machine and rebroadcasts them to a receiver sitting in a van in the civilian parking lot outside the base perimeter.
This is why classified and unclassified equipment must be physically separated, heavily shielded, and properly grounded.
Right.
You are fighting the invisible laws of electromagnetism.
Within the network itself, the threat takes the form of malicious logic: viruses, worms, and Trojan horses.
The system identifies a three-step life cycle for this digital threat. Step 1 is infection. This is the unauthorized invasion of information system applications by malware, causing malfunction or covert data extraction.
Step 2 is detection. A signature-based or behavior-based antivirus system signals the anomaly on the network.
Step 3 is reaction. The user must immediately cease operations, notify the information system security officer, and follow local containment procedures.
This digital vulnerability directly parallels physical vulnerability. A cyber breach is rarely the end goal. It is reconnaissance for a kinetic strike.
Which brings us to Part 5, Anti-Terrorism and Intelligence, derived from Section 18E. The anti-terrorism program is designed to deter or limit the effects of terrorist acts against Air Force personnel and facilities.
To combat predictability, the installation commander implements the Random Anti-Terrorism Measures Program, or RAM.
The system logic dictates that security measures must consistently change the look of the force protection program.
RAM introduces calculated uncertainty, random vehicle inspections, unpredictable gate closures, sudden ID checks to defeat adversary surveillance attempts.
The regulations dictate specific, highly detailed threat mitigation protocols for transportation, specifically when operating overseas or in elevated threat environments.
For ground transportation, the system mandates continuous physical checks. You must routinely check the interior and exterior of your vehicle for tampering.
Looking specifically for anomalies like unexplained fingerprints or smudges on the trunk, which could indicate the placement of an explosive device or tracking beacon.
When traveling overseas, you must travel with a companion. You must avoid using easily identifiable government vehicles.
You must not openly display military equipment, uniform items, or rank insignia. You must verify that taxi licenses match the driver's face.
Consider the clinical paranoia required to survive in a hostile environment. You are not just looking for a smudge on a trunk. You are assuming that every vehicle is a potential weapon. The system requires you to actively suppress your military identity because your identity makes you a target.
This suppression of identity extends to commercial air transportation overseas. The system mandates that personnel must consult the Department of Defense Foreign Clearance Guide prior to travel.
You must not use military addresses on your airline tickets. You must not discuss your military affiliation, unit movement, or operational destination with civilian passengers or airline staff.
You must carry plain, unremarkable civilian luggage, avoiding military-issue duffel bags. You must wear clothing that completely covers military-themed tattoos.
The physical kinetic threat, a terrorist attack or a kidnapping, is almost always preceded by an intelligence-gathering threat. Adversaries map your vulnerabilities long before they strike.
This requires us to understand human intelligence, or HUMINT. Human is intelligence derived directly from human sources.
The doctrine outlines the primary collection efforts utilized by both friendly forces and hostile entities.
First is interrogation of individuals in custody.
Second is source operations, involving the tasking of fully developed recruited sources or debriefing unsolicited walk-ins.
Third is debriefing of cooperating sources not in custody, such as local civilians or refugees.
Fourth is document and media exploitation, known as DOMEX, which involves extracting intelligence from captured hard drives, cell phones, and fixed storage devices.
The text defines 4 primary human intelligence threat areas that specifically target military personnel. First is espionage.
This is the act of obtaining, delivering, transmitting, communicating, or receiving national defense information with the intent to advantage a foreign nation.
Second is subversion. This is the act of inciting military or civilian personnel to violate laws, disobey lawful orders, or disrupt military activities with the intent to impair loyalty, morale, or discipline.
Third is sabotage. This involves acting with intent to injure, interfere with, or obstruct the national defense by willfully destroying or attempting to destroy national defense material, premises, or utilities.
Fourth is terrorism. This is the calculated use of unlawful violence or threat of unlawful violence to inculcate fear, intended to coerce or intimidate governments or societies.
These are not abstract concepts. They are the clinical methodologies of your destruction.
To combat these human-centric threats, Air Force Instruction 71-101 Volume 4 requires individuals to report specific contacts, behaviors, or information to the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, or AFOSI.
The critical component of this regulation is time. This report must occur immediately, mathematically defined as within 30 days of the contact.
Why exactly 30 days? Why does the system establish this specific temporal boundary?
Because the grooming process takes time. Unsolicited contacts, overly friendly foreign diplomatic exchanges, or sudden requests for unauthorized access to base facilities are the direct, observable precursors to subversion and espionage.
If a foreign intelligence entity targets you, they do not immediately ask for top-secret documents.
No, they initiate contact by exploiting your predictable habits. They frequent the same off-base coffee shop you visit every Tuesday. They strike up a conversation about your favorite sports team. They build rapport.
Over weeks, they assess your vulnerabilities.
Perhaps noting a complaint you made about your finances, linking back to adjudicative guideline number 6. The 30-day reporting window is designed to interrupt this psychological grooming cycle before the adversary establishes leverage.
If you wait 60 days, you may have already accepted a small loan or a gift. You are compromised.
We must now achieve system synthesis. To meet the strict Level B requirement of understanding, we cannot view these concepts in isolation. We must connect the sub-themes of this doctrine.
I pose a challenge based on the systemic logic we have outlined. If the base boundary is highly secured by armed forces applying the 9 desired effects of integrated defense, from anticipation down to defeat, why is an airman's single social media post considered a catastrophic breach of that physical perimeter? The post does not physically unlock a gate.
Because the physical fence means absolutely nothing if the digital and psychological perimeters collapse. Analyze the comprehensive web of vulnerability we have mapped today.
Let us construct the scenario.
An airman commits an operation security failure by posting a seemingly harmless routine schedule change on an unsecured internet-based capability. They complain that their weekend leave was canceled due to a sudden software upgrade on the
Wow.
Adversary surveillance, monitoring social media, detects this contrast. The post was made on an unencrypted mobile device connected to public Wi-Fi, creating a digital signature and a severe cybersecurity vulnerability.
The system logic identifies multiple infractions here, but how does it lead to a physical breach?
Watch the dominoes fall. A foreign intelligence asset identifies the airman's digital signature. They use open-source data to map the airman's life. They discover a profound financial vulnerability, massive, hidden cryptocurrency debt.
This triggers adjudicative guideline number 6.
The asset recognizes the leverage. They initiate an unsolicited contact, posing online as a sympathetic cryptocurrency recovery expert. They groom the airman. The airman, terrified of losing their security clearance due to the debt, fails to report the contact to AFOSI within the mandated 30-day window.
The psychological perimeter has now been breached.
Completely. The asset then leverages the debt, coercing the desperate airman into introducing a thumb drive containing malicious logic into an unclassified system at work, promising a financial payout.
This causes a data spill and a network infection.
The malicious logic maps the physical security protocols of the base. This network compromise facilitates a coordinated act of sabotage, an anti-terrorism threat, against a protection level 1 resource timed precisely when the automated cameras are rebooting due to the malware.
The adversary bypassed the base security zone.
They bypassed the physical delay barriers. They defeated the installation without ever touching the perimeter fence. That is system synthesis.
This concludes the doctrinal breakdown of Chapter 18. To summarize the Level B requirement for a technical sergeant, you must be able to construct meaning from these regulations. You must be able to explain that integrated defense is an all-encompassing, multidisciplinary program.
It is not just the deployment of physical barriers. It is the management of risk across spatial, digital, and psychological domains.
You must understand how isolated, seemingly insignificant operations security indicators piece together to form highly exploitable operational profiles.
And you must recognize that continuous behavioral evaluation, utilizing the clinical framework of the 13 adjudicative guidelines, is the primary mechanism to defend against internal compromise. The human mind is the most critical infrastructure.
I will leave you with a chilling clinical observation derived directly from the doctrine. The text states, "Your most predictable habit is the route you travel on a regular basis."
The system can fortify the base boundary. It can mandate the rigid physical separation of classified equipment to prevent the electromagnetic leakage of TEMPEST emanations. It can meticulously vet your financial records, your criminal history, and your psychological stability.
But the ultimate vulnerability cannot be legislated out of existence. It is human predictability.
The foundational purpose of security is to never permit the enemy an unexpected advantage. Evaluate your daily operational footprint. Look at the route you drive. Look at the network you connect to. Look at the secrets you are keeping. What advantage are you unwittingly providing right now simply by being predictable?
End of analysis.